So we're gonna go chase waterfalls today with the Nikon Z7 II. So we're out here this morning chasing waterfalls with the Nikon Z7 II. We'll probably focus in on using the wide angle lens, my 14-30, just to play around with this falls. So this is my first time at this falls. Slightly later start than I wanted because I got a little turned around on the way here. But we're here now. Light stuck me good because we're going to be in a nice little gorge, it seems like, so should have still plenty of good light left. So we're going to hike in there. It'll be my first time seeing it. We're just going to sort of follow me around, set up some compositions, get some photos, and see how it goes. Okay, so we made it up to the waterfalls. This is Honey Run Falls. It's my first time here. I've sort of scattered around, checked a couple different spots out. I am shooting my 14-30 right now on the Nikon Z7. And what I'm trying to do is compose the falls. They're coming down this way. And because we've got bright light up here and bright light over here, I'm trying to compose the shot so that I don't have as much dynamic range, so I don't have those extremes. So I'm sort of shooting through here into these caves that you see over this way, and we're going to have the falls coming down on the right side of the frame and drifting down here. Shooting with my 14-30, and we are setting at 14 millimeters wide, so a pretty wide shot to make this happen. And I think this is a pretty good one. We'll get a couple of these shots, then we'll sort of dip down here and shoot up into the falls. That will get more difficult because we have the light to contend with, but we'll see what we can make happen. So I'm shooting into the caves, got a pretty wide shot at 14 millimeters. We're just gonna shoot this. I may raise this just a touch, camera up just a touch. Because I'm on the Z7 II, I have room to crop, so I sort of want to shoot these a little wide, so even though I'm getting some more brighter spots up here that I might necessarily want, I can sort of crop in and post and sort of take care of that. With such the high megapixels and resolution of this camera, gives me a little bit more flexibility with the cropping than if I was shooting with the Z6 II. So that's one of the advantages of the Z7 II. I can sort of pull a little wider and sort of find my right composition at home. This is pretty close, so we're gonna zoom in about the midpoint, third of the way in. Back button focus on the falls, and let's take that shot. So we are shooting at ISO 100, aperture f14, so we have a nice deep depth of field, and also to help make sure I can use a slower shutter to get that movement of the water. And that puts my shutter speed at 20 seconds. I am using a polarizing filter, and I did tweak it to help remove some of the glare off the water, and that polarizing filter knocks a little bit, half a stop off the exposure. Again, just getting me that little bit of water blur that I want, that motion blur that I want. So let's take a peek at what we have here. Not too bad. Check the water. I like it. Make sure I'm nice and crisp. Shouldn't need the focus stack as wide out as I am. So I like that. So this is where the wide angle lens is really nice, because you can get this whole cave expanse in here and still make for an interesting image. I'm going to play a little bit with zooming in a little bit on this with the lens and just see what we get. Then we're gonna bounce down here in the water and sort of shoot up into the falls and see how that rolls. So we're gonna recompose here. So we were super wide, we're getting this whole cave, this whole expanse. Now I'm gonna actually zoom in a little bit on the 14-30. And what I'm trying to do, before I had the whole falls where it's cascaded down in the second layer, now I'm just sort of focusing on this top part of the falls. So we're gonna pose our shot in there. This also has the advantage of taking out some of that sunlight that's up here on the cliff edge, so that can be sort of helpful as well. So I think I've got a composition I like. I'm gonna set my focus point, get things in focus, check my histogram. So now, because I don't have as much light in it, my exposure is darkened, so I can actually slow my shutter down a little bit more, which is I'm gonna like, because I can get that motion blur in the water that I like, make these falls look nice and smooth. So that actually has put me at, I'm at an ISO 100, aperture f14, and now I'm running a 30-second exposure. And we're gonna, again, with the polarizing filter, make sure my focus point's there. And let's kick this off. Okay, 30-second exposure. We're just gonna check the back of the camera. I wanna zoom in a little bit, make sure things are crispy, make sure I didn't miss focus. I like that. Now zoom back out, let's take a look at the overall. not bad. I am going to recompose and just go a little more head on to the falls here and see what I can get. We're actually going to move the tripod for that as well. I'm going to shift over this way and just see what I can make happen with this. So the con to this move is now I'm starting to get a little more of those highlights up in here, which is going to be a little harder to control for. But we're going to sort of frame it up best I can and work it in there and see what we can get from this angle. And I'm going to move you over there because you're in my shot. Okay, so we're going to work this shot here. Like I said, I am getting a little more sky up there in the back, which I'm not super excited about, but we'll do what we can with it. I am zooming in a little bit, still only at like 19 millimeters or so, something like that. So not super zoomed in. This is what's real handy about the 14 to 30. I can get real close and, you know, still get everything I want in the shot. So, you know, super cool lens from that perspective. So let's just double check settings, double check my histogram, and let's get this shot and see how that goes. So again, we're at ISO 100, aperture f14, and a shutter speed of 30 seconds. Got my focus point all set. And let's give that a click. And let's just take a look at this on the back of the camera. Okay, so what am I looking for when I check the back of the camera? You heard me say that a couple times through here. I take my shot, take a look. So there's two main things I'm looking for when I'm photographing waterfalls. One, the sharpness of the image. Am I happy with it? Do I need to focus stack, or am I okay? Am I able to get it in the aperture and acceptable sharpness to me? So that's one of the things I check. And the way I check that is I just zoom in on the image, I look at some of the things closer to me, and I look at some of the things further away from me, and just make a judgment on, do I think it's sharp enough? Now, it's on the back of the LCD, so you know, you got to be a little careful with that. If you're in doubt, it makes it worth it to focus stack that image and make sure you get everything in. I've done videos on focus stacking. So the other thing I'm looking for when I'm doing waterfall photos is, am I happy with the motion blur of the water? So first I check the sharpness. If I'm happy with that, let's take a look at the motion blur of the water. And I'm just really looking to see, this is very subjective. Some people want a little more detail in the water, some want it sort of milky white. I just take a peek, zoom in a little bit, look up and down the falls, and make sure that motion blur is about where I want it, because that's something I can't really fix in post. I have to get it with my shutter speed. So that's the second thing I'm looking for when I say I'm taking a look at the back of the camera. It's handy to do that. Make sure you're going home with sharp photos. Make sure you're happy with the water, and you're good from there. I guess the third and final thing is, when you're photographing waterfalls, we've talked about this in some of my other waterfall videos, but the highlights, not only do you have to worry about the sky, but the water is white. So it's going to be one of the brighter objects in your frame. So you want to make sure you're not blowing that out. And I use the histogram to sort of pull that in, make sure you're not. But I usually give it just a quick visual inspection, make sure I'm not losing anything there, that when I get it in post, I have data to work with. So that's, I guess, the second and a half thing I work with when I'm looking at the back of the camera after I take a shot. So I think that works this side of the falls. So what I'm going to do is, still using the 14 to 30 lens, I'm going to hop down into the water here. This is a two-step waterfall, bigger one up here, small step here. Wide angle should be pretty good for this as long as the sky is not too bright. And we'll hop in here and shoot up that way and get a couple more shots of this falls with this lens and the Nikon Z7 II. Okay, so I moved down here to the bottom of the falls. Normally, if I was here a little earlier, or I'd started here at this spot, I probably would have gotten down a little lower and done a little more shoot up. But sky's starting to get brighter, the trees are starting to get brighter up there. So I'm actually shooting a little higher up, and instead I can sort of shoot down, and this helps me cut some of the light out of the top, keep that dynamic range within something that I can control a little easier from there. So we're working on composing up our shot, shooting out pretty wide. Let's take a look here. I am overexposed. Okay, so I'm out at 14 millimeters. I was a little overexposed, so I bumped my aperture from f14 to f16. Let me bump my shutter speed up just a little bit to 25 seconds. That helps get my histogram a little more in there. Got a little bit over there on the far right, right up there where the light's coming in for the trees. But I think this is a reasonable one. We're gonna get my focus point about a third of the way into the scene. And we're gonna take this shot and see how it goes. Okay, so we're gonna take another look at the back of the camera. That exposure is finished. Remember the two things I'm looking for sharpness of the image. So I'm gonna look at the things close to me, the things far away from me. Looking at the motion blur in the water. And because this is a waterfall, I'll take a look at those highlights in the water and make sure I haven't blown any of those out as well. Nice and crisp everywhere I want it. Water looks good. Yeah, So that image looks good to me on the back. I'm gonna play a little bit here with the composition, maybe another shot or two. I might try to shoot down low just to see how it goes, to see how that looks. And yeah, that's us with the Nikon Z7 II and the 14-30 and playing a little bit of wide angle this morning. Okay, we are gonna try a lower composition here. Like I mentioned, I'm not sure it'll work because that's gonna put me shooting more up into the falls with the light back there. That would have been a better shot for when I first got here, but we're gonna go ahead and give it a whirl here and see what we get. You never know. I typically like to get several different compositions, and we go home, we just choose the better ones, and we work from there. I'd rather get home with too many shots than wishing I'd shot something and didn't. So let's get this all lined up here. Okay, so we're getting down here pretty low, and like I thought, there is this bright spot that's like right up here that's gonna be a little problematic because it's just so much brighter than the rest of the scene. But we'll see what we can do. I am getting it to just barely fit in on the histogram, so we might be able to pull it back. So we're gonna get a couple of these shots. Like I said, I'd rather go home with too many images, see what looks good on the computer screen, and choose the ones I like. So far, I know I've got what I think is gonna be the better compositions up here on the ledge, shooting the top portion of the falls. These are just some extras in case I get something, you know, give it a whirl and see how it goes. So let's get this all lined up. I am out at about 16. I'm actually gonna pull that out probably to more like 15, just because, like I said, with this high resolution camera, I can do a little crop in to fix my composition, and that'll let me play with a little bit. I'd rather have a little bit of extra pixels in this case. Histogram, I'm pretty far over left because of the dark caves over here. And I got a little bit of highlight bump, which is the sky up past the trees up here. I'm an ISO 100, f16, and a 25-second shutter speed. So let's make sure I got my focus about a third of the way in. Now this is one I'm gonna go ahead and focus stack as well, and I'm gonna use the automatic focus shifting feature of the Nikon Z7 II to do that. I've done a video on that. Just, again, go home, make sure it's safe. I've got falls really close to me with some nice textured rock, and rock back up in the distance as well. So I wanna make sure I get all that. Okay. Cool. So we are going to now set up for focus shifting. And so the only adjustment I make, when I was doing a single focus point, I put that focus point about a third of the way into the scene, wide angle, pretty big aperture. That pretty much did pretty good. I'm just going to be sure here. Again, on the back of the LCD, sometimes it's difficult to tell 100%. So this is a safety shot. But in order to do the focus shifting, I am going to pull that focus point back towards me, find something a little contrasty to get it focused on. I have this saved as a quick option in my menu. So we're gonna kick this off and I'll talk a little more about what's going on. Okay, so the reason I moved that focus point closer to me, when I'm doing a single shot, I put it about a third of the way in the scene because I've got depth of field coming in front of that focus point and beyond that focus point. When I'm focus shifting, the focus shift in the Nikon, when I do it automatically, it's gonna start at the closest point I have in focus and then work its way through the scene. So I wanted to bring that focus point closer to me, kick off the focus shift from there. The camera's gonna automatically move that focus point back through, and it'll get me a nice, crispy, sharp image that I can stack together in Photoshop. Again, this is a safety shot. My actual desire is to use the single shot one and work with it, but I don't wanna get home, find out I missed focus. I wanna make sure I have these as safety. Okay, that focus shifting finished. So I'm just gonna take a quick peek at the back of the camera. It actually did that in 3 images. Now I am shooting at f16 to get my exposure right. Really with focus shifting, I could have set that aperture down to a little bit narrower slices to work my way through. But because I'm trying to keep my exposure pretty cool too, I went ahead and left it at f16. So it only took 3 shots to work its way through the scene. Not bad at all. You know, same composition, everything I like, so looking good. So let's move over here. Let's do a little bit of wrap up and yeah. So yeah, chasing waterfalls with the Nikon Z7 II. It was a great morning out. This was my first time with this particular set of waterfalls. It's pretty cool. I actually expected it to be flowing a little faster. We've had a lot of rain in the past 3 or 4 days, but it's actually not flowing much at all. So this must be more of a springtime waterfall. Got enough flow to be happy with it though, so that's good. When we first got here, I took my time, looked at the composition, put my camera bag down, wandered around to see what I could find, what I liked, and then we worked our way through the various shots. We worked with the Nikon Z7 II, the 14 to 30 millimeter wide angle lens, and we sort of worked our way through, talked through the shots. I've probably got, I don't know if that was 4, 5, 6 different compositions here. So what we'll do is we'll take these photos home, we'll pull them up in Bridge, and I'm gonna choose my favorite to go ahead and do a quick edit on for this video. So you sort of get to see from start to finish, heading out to a new place, photographing with the Z7 II and the 14 to 30, picking my favorite image and then pulling into Lightroom, do some edits on it, and see what we get at the end. So we'll see you back at the office. Okay, so we're back here in the office, and I've pulled the images off my camera from chasing waterfalls with the Nikon Z II. I've already got them pulled into Lightroom. We're just gonna go through, take a look at the images. I'm gonna choose one of them to do a quick edit on, and we'll do a quick edit, see how it turns out. Let's turn into Lightroom here. And like I said, I've already pulled the photos into Lightroom, and let's sort of scroll through here. This is where I was set up on the ledge to the right of the waterfall. Here I am where I zoomed in just a little bit. This is where I sort of moved over to the left. I was sort of sitting more to the direct right of the waterfall, and I shifted to the left to get this image. And then from that ledge, I worked my way down into the water in front of the fall. And this is when I was standing up and sort of shooting down into it. And this one, my purpose of the composition was to try to reduce this light that's up here above the waterfall, just try not to have too much of it in frame. And so that's what this shot is. And then I lowered the tripod, pretty much a similar position to where I was up high, but brought it down lower, and did one shot like this with no focus stacking. Just put my focus point around about in here somewhere to get that. And then just to be the safety shot, I did go ahead and get a focus shift using the Nikon automated feature, and that collected 3 images while I was out there, and it got me this one, and this one. So if I went with those 3 images, I'd want to focus stack them in Photoshop to pull those images together. And just real quick while I'm on here, let's just take a real quick look at this. This is the first image that's not focus stacked, and it's got a little bit of, it's not quite as crisp as I would want it, which is why I did that focus stack. Here about the second image, it gets just a little, let it load up, it gets just a little bit sharper. So this is a case where I'm glad I have the focus stacked images, because I do think that's what I would do. I would blend them to make sure I get that sharpness that I want out of it. So let's go back to full, and let's take a quick look at these images. I like this image. I'm a little far back, and this tree up here on the left gets a little bit in the way. I could crop that out and work through that. But if we go through my images, I get into this one, where I zoomed in just a touch more. This was done, I believe, at 19 millimeters. So still a wide shot, but I think it cleans that up, makes things look a little better. This one, when I moved to the left, I don't like how this composition ended up. A little bit of it is because of how the rock formation was. It gives it this tilt. It's hard to reconcile. I could probably try to straighten it up a little bit. Maybe get into something like that would help it out a little bit, but not a super big fan of that composition. So this one I like as well. This is the one where I was standing in the water in front of the fall. I do like it because I can see the water come down, hit this top layer right here, and then cascade down that second shelf. Might have taken a little more time to compose it a little differently in the field to get a little stronger composition. I'd also want to go through it a little more closely and take a look at my focus points, make sure I was good there. Then we bump into this other image. The only thing I like this, except that this big rock here, when I'm down lower in the water and the tripod's set lower, and I lose some of it. Whereas this one, I can see the water flow down through here. I think that could end up being interesting. And then when I come over here, it's just this block. Could be an interesting photo, but it's probably not the one I'm going to choose to edit right now. So of these images I took out there, I think I'm going to edit this one right here. I'm going to go ahead and give it 2 stars up there, so I know that's the one I'm going to work on. And I think this is the one I'm going to edit for the purpose of this video and zip through. The other potentials would be, I might play with this at some point, the one where I'm further out, maybe clamp these or just crop it slightly different. And then I think I would also consider playing with the one where I was standing like this, because I can see that tiered effect coming down. But for this video, we're going to do this one right here. This is going to be a fast edit on this image. I'm just going to go through some of my basics. I've done a video where I walk through my basic editing workflow in Lightroom, and I'll link to that video up here. And if you want to check that out, I go into a little more detail about why I'm doing what I'm doing. Here, I'm just going to try to get through this image fairly quickly and just do some rough edits. Just clean it up a little bit so you can see what it comes from the raw file to what it has the potential to be. Anything portfolio-wise, I would spend a little more time on it than I'm going to do here, but let's just zip through this. So I'll take this image. We are going to come over to the develop panel, and we are going to start with lens corrections, throw those on. Then I like to come down to calibration, just play with this a little bit, bring the blue saturation up just a little bit, turn that on, turn that off. Yep, that gives me just a little bit more brightness. Then we're gonna come up to basic, and I'm gonna work on my white balance. I feel like it's just a touch off, so I'm gonna do auto just to see what it does. And auto brings it much closer to what I want. If anything, I'm gonna see if I want it a little warmer. Not really. Yeah, so we're going to stick with this 5100 right here for white balance. I like the way that looks. I am going to, I don't think this will auto straighten just because it's got a little bit of a lean to it. Problem is those trees up there want to be like that. So we'll just do a tiny bit of a straightening adjustment on that. For exposure, let's see what Lightroom wants to do. It wants to brighten it up a bit. I'm actually going to keep it down. I'm going to get some exposure out in other ways. So let's bring the highlights down a touch. Let's bring those shadows up just a little bit because I got a little dark area up in here. I'm going to pull the whites out just a little more. That gives me a little bit more brightness in the water and some of these other areas. Bring the blacks down. Oops, started to lose my blacks. Put them in right there. I'm going to pull my clarity down just a little, bring my texture up, boost my vibrance just a touch, and let's dehaze it just a little bit. I'm going to dehaze just a little. So I think that gets me pretty close into my basic panel where I want to be. I'm feeling a little bit too much green, so just so I can correct that, I'm going to come down, bounce into my HSL panel, go to saturation, use the dropper, find a spot of green, and pull that down just a little bit. Take a quick look at that off and on. Yeah, just that little hint of green coming out I think helps the image a little bit, so we're going to stick with that. Let's hit the tone curve. I think this is going to benefit from a medium contrast. I do like that. Bump the blacks up just a little bit. Good. I am going to bring my contrast down just a little bit. I feel like it's just a little too chunky. Okay, I like that. Okay. So now I'm just going to do a couple of gradients. I feel like this foreground area right in here is a little bright. So we're going to come in here, grab a linear gradient, and we're going to sort of pull this in like this. What I'm trying to do is get this masked area to not be quite so bright. I want the attention to go to the waterfall, so I'm going to pull that down a little bit, bring the exposure down a touch, just a little bit, and bring those highlights down there a fair amount, just so that water that the polarizing filter didn't cut the glare off of isn't quite so bright. Okay, I like that. I'm going to do another filter up here in the trees. We're just going to add a radial gradient. What I'm trying to do is just cut down the brightness of that. I want the waterfall to be the bright object. So we'll just bring the exposure down just a little bit. Knock those highlights down. These are very small adjustments. I just knocked like a quarter stop off of that exposure. Pull those highlights down a bit. Again, just trying to get that waterfall to be slightly more bright. On that same note, we're going to do another radial gradient and put it over the waterfall. So in this case, what I'm trying to do is pull attention into the waterfall and less on the rocks. So we're actually going to invert this so that the changes happen to the areas outside of the mask. So we're just going to, in that note, bring the exposure down, not too much, just a little bit. Again, small adjustments, negative 0.13 on this, and that's it. I think that's good there. Okay, so we are just going to throw a brush on here real quick. I'm going to bring the clarity down on the waterfall just a little bit. So let's bring that clarity down, like negative 15, and brush over the waterfall just to get a little bit smooth. Okay, and that looks good to me. And the last thing we're going to do is just bring this in just a touch with the crop. So we get that waterfall right over here on this line over there. Bring it in. Yep, I like that a little better. It just brings the waterfall a little bit more to the forefront of this instead of having so much empty rock over here, which didn't have a whole lot of interesting things over this way. So we'll just sort of clean that up a little bit. And let's go through a small vignette. Oh, detail. Let's put a mask on the sharpening. Bring that up. 35. Perfect. And let's throw a little bit of vignette and trying to pull focus in. Usually swing it, that's a bit much. See what that looks like. Cool, so that's just like a -6 vignette on this. It helps bring everything into the waterfall. Give that 3 stars just so I know I've edited it. So that's the image I wanted to edit here in Lightroom from our trip out to the waterfalls. I think it was a decent little choice. And like I said, if you want to see more detailed look at my edit, why I make certain decisions the way I do, be sure to check out my basic editing workflow for Lightroom. This was super fast, just to sort of take it from a raw format, just so you can sort of see how we whip it into shape real quick, get it closer to a final image. I would do more tweaks, spend some more time on it if I was going to put it in my portfolio, but this gets it there pretty quick for the sake of this video. So I hope you enjoyed this sort of beginning to end look at going out, getting a photograph, coming home, and editing it. Like I said, we headed out to a waterfall that was new to me. Used the Nikon Z7 II with a Nikon 14 to 30 millimeter lens. Got a few different compositions while we're out in the field. Brought the images home, put them in Lightroom, chose my favorite, did some fast edits on it to sort of whip it into shape from a raw file to what could be a final social media file. Portfolio, take a little more work, make sure I got all the tweaks I wanted, and sort of from beginning to end. So I hope you enjoyed today's video on chasing waterfalls, and if you did, please hit that like button. And if you want to see future landscape photography content from me, including behind the scenes, tips, tricks, gear reviews, and videos like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any landscape photography content from me in the future. And thank you for watching.